Hi guys, right, welcome back to the Daihatsu Fourtrak restoration. I know this episode probably feels like it's been a long time coming, and I'm sorry about that. Reason being, I've been so busy in the workshop with other projects coming and going of day-to-day stock, etc. Things like this that I'm building basically for myself, they get fit in between main work and money makers. So obviously these stages can take a little while in between each other, but I'm back on the Fourtrak. Things have been progressing in the meantime, but I'm going to show you through the bits and pieces I've done since you last saw the truck, and then move on to today's video, which is getting that body, that freshly refurbished body, onto that chassis, which of course you've seen me refurbish. So the last time you saw this body, I believe it was in primer on the inner wings, engine bay and the underside. Well, since then, it's had paint, it's had clear, it's had the wiring looms remade and rerun. I say had it done, I've done that myself, and I'm certainly not an auto electrician, so it's probably taken me a little bit longer than it would have taken a professional. But it's all been redone, so I'll show you the underside and show you what it's looking like. So the underside of the Fourtrak is looking brand new. Last time you saw it, as I said, it's in primer, so I think it had all the fabrication work done. It had been treated, it had been chipped, it had been put in base coat. No, sorry, it hadn't been put in base coat, it had been put in primer. And now it's had its base coat in clear, so it's looking really good underneath. What I've done with the wiring loom, because generally with Fourtraks, what you tend to see is the wiring loom is just zip tied to the chassis, and I really was not happy about that. So what I've done, I've re-loomed everything, and rather than using the standard Daihatsu fixing method, which is basically like a plastic tang which is taped to the loom and then pushed in a hole, I've used these stainless P-clips into riv nuts. So the loom is fixed to the body, it will never touch the chassis, and it should be on there for life in a much more sturdy fashion than it ever was from the factory. So really happy with that. As I say, I'm not an electrician, so I've rerun that loom. I've cleaned up a few bits of wiring that were done in a previous life. So there was lots of things cut into the wiring loom, not done very well. I've deleted all of that, and I've basically just cleaned the loom and minimized it as much as possible, so that it's just running twin sets of rear lights. You've got the reverse lights, fog lights, and you've got things like the rear window heater and things like that. So that's what I've been up to since you last saw the Fourtrak. So even though you haven't seen it on camera, it's not that I've just completely forgotten the project. It's just I do these odd jobs in between other bits and pieces, like when I've got paint drying on another project. So anyway, that's enough catch up. As I said, today's video is all about getting that refurbished body on that refurbished chassis. And at that stage, in theory, I can start messing around and getting this thing running and driving again. Obviously, it still needs the bodywork doing on the top side of the Fourtrak body. That's a completely different video. But really, the goal today is to get that body back on there. So, as you can see, I've got it on these drainage crates at the moment just because I've been working on that loom and I needed full access to the underside. What I'm going to be doing is rolling the dolly that I made a few episodes ago, rolling that back underneath, getting that on the body, getting rid of those crates. Then that body will be able to roll around on its dolly. I'll get it on the ramp, get the body up, chassis underneath, drop the body on, and then and that should be a job done. Now that all sounds very easy, but I've got a feeling it's going to be a little bit more in depth than that, but let's have a go anyway. Okay, so the body is now fully back on the chassis and I think it looks great already. But just to run you through what I've done, there's a very, very subtle lift kit on the truck. Now this is a 1.5 inch lift kit. So that goes on top of the standard body mounts and it brings the whole thing up just 1.5 inches. You can get up to a 3 inch lift kit for these trucks, but I didn't want to go quite that big. The reason I've gone for a 1.5 is because I really want to have some slightly bigger, more meaningful tyres on the wheels eventually. It won't be these wheels, it'll be the original Daihatsu Pepper Pots, but I wanted to have some bigger tyres. So that little bit of a lift will come in handy later on. Now you're probably looking at this and thinking, right, okay, it's got a bit of a reverse rake. So the back end is higher than the front end. It's looking like a 1980s drag car, but the reason for that is the front suspension on these Fourtraks is torsion bar controlled. So when I took all the torsion bars apart originally when I was doing the chassis refresh, I've chucked all the torsion bars back in there on a low setting. So what I need to do now is retension those to bring the front end up and make the whole thing sit a little bit more level. It doesn't have to be perfectly level, but it's a little bit more level than it sits currently. And then that'll be the layout of the body, the chassis all done, and I can start moving on to getting this engine plumbed back in, and in theory, we can get that running soon. Obviously there's a few things in the engine bay that need to be cleaned up still. The engine itself is good, and it's had a full service as you've seen, but all the ancillary items that are around the engine bay, I've just chucked them back in for now, just to make sure everything was in its right place when the body went back on. So if you see anything that looks a little bit scruffy there, it will be getting sorted at a later stage. But massive, massive milestone in the project. The body is back on the chassis. And I'll be honest, there was a time, in fact there's more than one time, where I thought during this project that, you know, this body may never see the original chassis it came with ever again, because when I separated it originally, I've just continually found issue after issue or bodge jobs, poor work, extended rust, just issue after issue. But it's been a constant fight to get this body back into a healthy state. We're now there and it's back on the chassis, which is essentially brand new, and I just couldn't be happier with it. So enough waffle, I'm gonna get on and get that front end lifted up a bit. Okay, so I've finished putting all the bits and pieces back in the engine bay. They're going to help this thing to run. So this engine hasn't been started for a long time. So this, I've done all the fluids and everything, but this is just going to be a quick run. Hopefully it will fire. I can't foresee any issues, but we'll find out shortly. Anyway, I've hooked up a battery, so let's just see how this goes. Right, and it appears to be turning over absolutely fine. Not firing, it could be a fuel issue. Obviously all the lines, I have bled them as best as I can, but I think perhaps I need to crank it through a little bit more, crack the injectors and bleed the system a little bit more, just to make sure there's no air in the fuel system, because I think that is the issue we're facing. So I'm going to try that next. Let's just crack one injector and we'll see if we're getting any fuel to the rail. Okay, so it doesn't look like we're getting any fuel to the rail anyway. So I'll hand prime that again. Now that is typical Daihatsu. This thing has not run for well over a year. Put everything back together, a little bit of fuel bleeding, and away it goes. This is why I'm restoring a Daihatsu Fourtrak, because they're just such brilliant, brilliant vehicles. So this is it, guys. The Fourtrak is out in natural daylight for the first time in a very, very long time. I can't even remember the date it was that I drove this thing into the workshop before pulling it apart. But since then, a lot has happened, as I'm sure you're aware. I've mentioned it already in this video, but this truck definitely had a lot of hidden faults, a lot of secrets. Anyway, let's not focus on that. Focus on the positives. It is now well on the way back to life. I know it doesn't look like it in this shot. It looks probably a little bit rough to you guys, but I can assure you, because I'm working from the inside out, if you like, I'm trying to make sure everything is done properly and is as future-proof as can be. The bits that you can't see, basically the bits I've done right now. The next phase obviously is going to be the bodywork, and then the whole thing will look a lot better. It's still riding low on the front. I need to adjust those torsion bars a little bit more. It doesn't help that tyre's sort of flat as well. But these are all things that I can sort. That's not an issue. Really, I just wanted to move this out into the natural daylight just because it hasn't been out here for so long. The fact that this engine is running and it came back to life so willingly is a real bonus. It just tells me everything I need to know about not only Fourtraks, but this Fourtrak in particular, and it really validates why I love them. Now, long way to go still, but this is a huge step forward. I wanted to get this body back on in this episode, and I said I might get it running and driving. I've done that as well. I'm really pleased. Now, I'm gonna have to go really carefully because at the moment there are no brakes, no handbrake, no brakes, there's nothing. That's a story for another episode. But for now, there's no brakes at all, so I'm gonna have to be very careful how I move this thing around. But here it is, moving under its own power. But really, the end of this phase, it was all about the underside, as I've said. So I really want to go into the workshop now, and I'm going to show you the money shot for this episode. So I'm going to go put it back on the ramp and we'll go from there. You are joining me inside the workshop and with the Fourtrak on the ramp. So I'm going to show you quickly underneath what we're looking at. As I said, it looks a bit rough up top, but this episode was all about the underside. And I think you'll agree, it looks a lot better under here than it does up top. So all that work was indeed the hidden bits, making sure everything is as good as possible. We've got a brand new exhaust system all the way through. Obviously there's a handwritten note on there because when I store exhaust and things, I don't always have them stored by the car, and when I've got multiples, I mark them up. Anyway, completely rust free, completely solid, everything protected, all bushes changed to poly bush, including that lift kit, all boots brand new, everything's perfect. So I shouldn't have to do anything under here. But I do need a pair of handbrake cables for this. I do have them in place here, as you can see, but I'd like to change those for new ones. Can't seem to find a set anywhere, so if any of you guys know where I can get a decent set, especially a genuine set of handbrake cables for a Daihatsu Fourtrak, please let me know. Because the ones I'm finding online, they claim to be for this generation of Fourtrak, but having bought a couple of sets of them, I can tell you they're not correct. Anyway, I'll sort that one way or another. The fuel tank is the original tank. These are impossible to get hold of. That one was fortunately not too badly wrecked. It was savable. It's now perfect. It should go on for many years to come. All the brake lines are new. All the fuel lines are new. Everything that should have been changed has been changed. Engine's had a complete service. Now, if I'm completely honest, there's a very slight drip from the sump plug. I did change the crush washer on there, but I don't know. I might have changed it for a slightly thicker one. I'll work it out. Anyway, that is the underside of the Fourtrak at the end of this stage. So as always, a massive thank you to you guys for watching this episode. Once again, I know it probably feels like it's taken a long time to get this one out to you. It's for the reasons I explained earlier. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in and checking out this episode. There will be another one as soon as I can get it out, obviously in between other work, but there will be another one very soon. So until next time, cheers.